Guys of Reddit who have rejected someone, what's the worst way someone has taken it? Story 1. This girl would not stop texting me in high school, so I blocked her. She then went on to tell her friends she was depressed and couldn't get over me, even though I rarely spoke to her in person, only through her constant stream of messages. After that, she fainted, almost once a day during class, but coincidentally, only in the lessons she shared with me would she cry to her friends that I was the reason she was fainting. Of course, she never hurt herself during these faints and always managed to land comfortably on the ground. She also used to storm out of the door in the middle of class and fall out the door. Story 2. A dude asked me over to his house to study. He put on some porn and asked to jerk me off. I said no. And then he figured he'd ask if he could blow me. I rejected him and told my mom to get me. He persisted the whole time. Then in school, whenever he saw me, he loudly called me gay to everyone around him. I'm not into dudes, and he was in the closet, but honestly, I just smiled and kept moving every time, and he eventually gave up. I think he came out 2 years later and was one of the 4 gay dudes in school in revolving relationships with each other. Story 3. When my best friend was in school, she came to him hard in public. There were about a dozen people around. He was startled and turned her down. She then started screaming, stomping her feet and crying. Then she told all her friends that she would commit suicide. They tried to guilt my friend with that, but he managed to shrug it off. The whole thing blew off in 3 days. Story 4. A girl at work started playing some aggressive footsie at work. When I pushed her foot away and gave her a look, she told me I was not as attractive as I thought and that I should start dating girls in my league. Story 5. We dated a few times, and I decided that, while she was excellent, I wasn't interested in pursuing a long-term relationship with her. So let's let her know face to face rather than over text so we can have a drink in the city. I ensured we got a booth for some privacy and told her that it'd been nice, but I didn't think taking things further would work. She began to cry uncontrollably and very loudly, demanding what she'd done wrong. Even from our booth, people started looking over at us. Maybe it was unfair of me to do it in public, but honestly, we'd only gone out for dinner and drinks about 4 times by that stage, so I wasn't expecting her to react so strongly. Story 6. I broke up with this girl and she didn't want to. She tried to talk me out of it and then tried to rape me by pinning my hands with her knees and trying to take my pants off. Being bigger and stronger, I just stood up and dumped her on the floor. I never thought about rape the same again after that. One time later, her other ex, my best friend, was visiting and she came over. Things seemed to be going okay when she suddenly leapt up and tried to come down on my chest with her knees like some wrestling move. I was so mad that I threw her out of my front door and told her to get the fuck out of my life. It turns out she was jealous of our relationship. Story 7. My ex-boyfriend broke up with me. 1 month later, I asked us to go back together and she refused. 3 months later, I found a new girlfriend. Everything is fine. A few months after, my ex went inside my college and asked me to go back. I refused. She threw a tantrum in the middle of the stands. Everyone looked at me. She said I was a son of a bitch for not wanting her back. Never saw her again. Story 8. My best friend broke up with his psychotic girlfriend, so I went over to be supportive, and I called a female friend over that I know him, and I left. Around 3 a.m., he called me to tell me his ex tried crawling through the dog door to get into his house. Somehow she manipulated him into getting back with her, and she's still that psychotic. Story 9. We were 16 and in our first year in college. We'd been good friends up to this point. One day I decided to confide in her that I had a crush on one of her friends from an org. She went mental. No fair, I got to you first. She then transferred to all my classes and told everyone I was stalking her. All my friends and hers didn't believe, fortunately except for that one girl I had a crush on. Story 10. I met a married woman when I was 14 and she was 19. When I was 16, she decided that she loved me, and I was 16, so naturally I loved her back. When I was 18, it started getting weird because it felt like she mentally tortured me. I was like a boy toy to her. She was the first woman I'd been with. She was hot as shit, but that was her only good quality. She would try to make me jealous by being all over her husband and would go weeks without saying anything to me. I have guilt about that man who wanted to be my mentor because he's a good man. I tried breaking it off with her, but she didn't like that, so I was happy when she broke it off. I think she just needed to feel in power. Now I'm 25 and have an awesome wife who loves me for who I am, and we try to help each other grow through encouragement. Reflecting on it, I'm glad it happened because it allows me to fully appreciate my wife for whom she is, knowing that she wants the best for me. Sorry if this isn't well written, which is probably why I'm a mechanic. Story 11. When I was 16, I slept with a 15-year-old girl who was a friend of a friend. The next day, she was pestering me to meet her again, and I wasn't up for it, so she texted me saying, "If you don't meet me tonight, I'll tell the pigs you raped me." I didn't text her back or see her again. I kept the messages just in case. Story 12. When we met, we were both in the company of our best friends, who both turned out to be shitty people. My friend in particular had a habit of flirting with any guys in the vicinity, like a cat in heat, usually putting me down in the process. My now ex was the more outgoing of the two, so naturally she's all over him trying to nudge me onto his weird friend. Finally, after a month of her flirting with him and him only having eyes for me, she gave up and started talking shit about how ugly he was every time I brought him up. The same girl got pregnant with another guy who left her. I was told he cheated on her, and the next thing we know, her son is a rape baby. He is not. Story 13. I was seeing a girl a few years back, and she started messaging me last year. I'm now married and have 2 kids, so I turned down all of her advances. She then proceeded to tell me that if I didn't meet her for sex, she'd tell my wife that I'd been having an affair since the start so she could have me to herself. I'd shown my wife the messages, and my wife contacted said girl, telling her she had seen the letters and she knew what she was up to, which then spiraled her into some delusion that I was pretending to be my wife. She turned up at my house to try and ruin my marriage, but was swiftly met with my wife slamming the door in her face. She then went full-on crazy and threw a rock through my window and threatened to burn my house while my kids sat in the living room playing. The police got called and she was arrested. I now have an injunction against her and thankfully haven't heard anything from her since. Story 14. I was once in a club at about 3 a.m. They have put the lights on and are clearing everyone out. A very drunk girl, possibly on something else too, looked spaced out, was shouting at a guy to take her back. She threatened to shit herself. Then she shit herself. I can only assume she was wearing a thong because it came out in 2 distinct piles under her mini dress. Her look of smug satisfaction will be forever etched on my memory. She had won by shitting all over her legs and the floor and then getting arrested. Story 15. We went on one date. I wasn't feeling it and ghosted. Within the next month or so, she had become roommates with the guy that introduced us. Found a way to be naked or near naked every time I came over. With an "oops, I hope my boyfriend doesn't find out" comment. After a month or so of that not working, she shows up to a party with a boyfriend, still spends all night trying to hang around me, and gets into an argument with me for some odd reason. I passed out in the living room that night. She intentionally leaves her bedroom door open, so I wake up to see her having sex. After that, I stopped hanging out at my friend's place. She stopped paying rent, and I had to kick her out. I almost had to take her to court, and the boyfriend was only ever seen that night at the party. Story 16. This was in high school. Talked to a girl a bit, mainly over Facebook. I told her I wasn't interested in being more than friends. A few days later, we had a shooting a few blocks from the school just about when people walked home. She messaged me the next day saying, "It's like you don't even care about me. I could have been shot dead. I walk home that way. I could be dead, and you wouldn't care. And I would haunt you for the rest of your life until you died." She wasn't even there when the shooting happened. I still hope she doesn't haunt me.